Sagittarius. Welcome to Mary's Angel Tarot. This is a general reading for Sagittarius Sun, Moon, Rising, and Venus. Okay, Sagittarius, let's get started. You've been tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix, and you've known it. You've known for a while now that whatever has been sitting on your energy isn't ordinary exhaustion. It isn't burnout. It isn't the kind of weariness that comes from working too hard or sleeping too little or carrying the normal weight of an adult human life. This is something else. Something that wraps around you the moment you start to gain momentum. Something that presses down on your chest right when your spirit begins to rise. You'll have a day, maybe two, where you feel like yourself again, where the fog lifts and your mind clears and your body feels light and your motivation returns and you think, okay, I'm back. I'm finally through it. And then almost as if something is watching, almost as if your relief itself triggers a response, the heaviness returns, thicker than before, more deliberate than before. And you're back on the ground wondering, what is wrong with me? Why can't I maintain anything good? Why does it feel like something keeps pulling me back every time I start to move forward? You've asked yourself those questions 100 times. You've questioned your discipline, your mental health, your habits, your worthiness. You've turned the microscope inward and examined every flaw, every weakness, every possible explanation for why your life seems to operate under a ceiling that no amount of effort can break through. But you never found a satisfying answer, because the answer isn't inside you. The answer is that something was done to you, and the person who did it has just fallen. I need to be very specific about what I mean when I say that, because I don't want your mind to race to a place of fear or paranoia. What happened to you wasn't some cinematic curse delivered with candles and chanting in a dark room, although the spiritual mechanics of it are more real than most people are comfortable acknowledging. What happened was that a woman in your life, someone who was close enough to your energy to access it, someone who knew you well enough to know where your vulnerabilities lived, directed something toward you with intention. And the intention wasn't love, it wasn't protection, it wasn't concern for your well-being. The intention was containment. She wanted you limited. She wanted your growth capped at a level that didn't threaten her. She wanted your light dimmed to a wattage that didn't expose the darkness she was carrying in herself. And she didn't necessarily do this through what you'd traditionally call witchcraft, although the energy of what she put into motion functions the same way. She did it through focused negative intention, through words spoken about you when you weren't present that carried a weight designed to stick, through energy directed at you in moments of jealousy, rage, or calculated malice that attached itself to your field like a vine wrapping around a tree, not killing it outright, but slowly, patiently, systematically cutting off its access to sunlight. And it worked. For a while it worked. You can feel the truth of that, even as you resist it. Some part of you has always known that the obstacles in your life were disproportionate to your effort, that the bad luck was too consistent to be random, that the way opportunities dissolved at the last minute, the way relationships soured right when they started to deepen, the way money slipped through your fingers no matter how tightly you held it, the way your health dipped at the most inconvenient moments, all of it had a pattern too precise to be coincidental. And that knowing, that quiet suspicion that something external was interfering with the natural flow of your life has been one of the loneliest things you've carried. Because who do you tell? Who do you say this to without sounding unstable? Who in your life is equipped to hear the sentence, "I think someone did something to me spiritually," and respond with anything other than a concerned look and a gentle suggestion that you might be stressed? So you kept it to yourself. You carried the suspicion like a stone in your pocket touching it in private moments, turning it over, wondering if you were right or if you were losing your grip on reality. And that isolation, that inability to speak the truth of what you were sensing, added another layer of heaviness to an already unbearable weight. But here's what changed. Something happened to this woman that she didn't see coming. And before I tell you what it was, I want to be very clear about the energy with which I'm sharing this. I'm not telling you this so you can gloat. I'm not telling you this to feed a desire for revenge, because I know you, and despite everything she put you through, revenge isn't what lives in your heart. What lives in your heart is a desperate, exhausted need for it to stop, for the invisible pressure to lift, for the ceiling to break, for the vine to release the tree. And that's exactly what's happening. Not because you wished harm on her, not because you performed any counter ritual or fought fire with fire, but because the spiritual laws that govern this universe are self-correcting, and energy that is directed at someone with malicious intent has a return address. It always has a return address. And whatever she sent toward you has completed its circuit and returned to its origin, not as punishment from a vengeful God, although I understand why the title of this message might suggest that framing, but as the natural, inevitable, mathematically precise consequence of tampering with someone else's spiritual field. She disrupted your energy, and now her own energy has been disrupted. Not by you, not by any human hand, by the very forces she set in motion when she decided that your diminishment was necessary for her comfort. I want to talk about who this woman is to you, because I think naming the dynamic is part of your liberation. This isn't a stranger. This isn't some distant figure who saw you from afar and decided to target you for reasons you'll never understand. This is someone who was close to you. Someone who occupied a position of trust or intimacy or familial connection. Someone whose presence in your life felt, at least initially, like it was supposed to be there. And that's what made the whole thing so devastating and so confusing, because you cared about this person. Maybe you still do, in that complicated way where love and resentment coexist in the same breath. You opened yourself to her. You let her into the inner rooms of your life where your dreams lived, where your vulnerabilities were stored, where the most tender, unprotected parts of you were visible. And she took what she saw in those rooms and used it. Not to support you, not to celebrate you, to map your weaknesses, to learn exactly where you were soft so that when the time came to press, she'd know exactly where to apply the pressure. And the cruelest part is that she disguised it. She disguised the harm as concern, as advice, as the kind of involvement that looks from the outside like someone who cares deeply about your well-being. But the energy beneath the surface told a different story. The energy was possessive, controlling, territorial, in a way that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with ownership. She wanted you in a specific position in her life, a position that served her narrative, that maintained her sense of superiority, that kept the hierarchy she'd established intact. And when you started to grow beyond that position, when your light started to intensify in ways that threatened to outshine her own, when your potential started to become visible to other people in ways that she couldn't control or claim credit for, that's when the interference began. That's when the spiritual assault was launched. Not with a single dramatic act, but with a slow, sustained campaign of energetic sabotage that was so subtle, so woven into the fabric of your daily interactions that you couldn't separate the attack from the relationship. You just knew that something felt wrong, that being around her left you drained, that conversations with her left you doubting yourself, that her presence in your life correlated with your worst periods of stagnation, confusion, and unexplainable bad fortune. And every time you started to see the pattern, every time you came close to naming it, something would shift. A gesture of kindness, a moment of apparent vulnerability, a performance of care so convincing that you'd second guess yourself and think, no, I'm being unfair. She wouldn't do that. She loves me. She didn't love you, not in the way that word is supposed to mean. She loved what you provided. She loved the version of you that was small enough to orbit around her without threatening her gravitational center. And the moment you showed signs of developing your own gravity, your own pull, your own orbit that didn't revolve around her, the sabotage intensified. Because your independence wasn't just inconvenient to her, it was existentially threatening. Your growth exposed her stagnation. Your light illuminated her shadow. Your rising was, in her perception, her falling. And rather than do the work of rising herself, rather than confront the parts of herself that were keeping her stuck, she chose the darker option. She chose to pull you back down to a level where she could still feel tall. Now, the fall. Let me tell you about the fall because the energy of it is unmistakable and it carries a quality that I think is going to bring you a very specific kind of peace. What happened to this woman wasn't dramatic in the way the world would notice. There was no public humiliation, no catastrophic event that made the news. The fall happened internally. Something inside her collapsed. A structure she'd been maintaining, a persona, a facade, a carefully constructed identity that depended on external validation and the diminishment of the people around her, cracked. And the crack didn't come from outside. It came from within. The very energy she'd been directing at you, the toxic intention, the spiritual interference, the accumulated weight of everything she'd done in the dark, turned inward, like a boomerang that's been circling for years and finally found its way home. And when it landed in the center of everything she'd built her false self upon. Her confidence, the manufactured kind that was really just controlled insecurity, shattered. Her relationships, the ones she'd been managing and manipulating the same way she managed and manipulated you, began to show cracks. Her health, her finances, her emotional stability, all of the areas she'd been attacking in your life began to mirror the exact distress she'd been projecting onto you. Not because God is cruel, because energy is precise, because what you send into the world doesn't disappear when it reaches its target. It loops, it returns, and it returns carrying compound interest. I want to pause here and talk about what you might be feeling right now because I think there's a complexity to your emotional response that deserves to be honored. Part of you feels validated. Finally, after all this time of wondering if you were imagining things, of doubting your own perception, of being told by your own inner critic that you were paranoid or ungrateful or making excuses for your own failures, you're hearing someone say no. You weren't imagining it. Something real was happening. Someone really was working against you. And that validation feels like oxygen after years of breathing in a room with sealed windows. But there's another part of you, a part that I deeply respect, that feels something else entirely. Something that looks a lot like sadness. Because you didn't want this. You didn't want to be right about this. You wanted to be wrong. You wanted the explanation to be simpler, cleaner, less heartbreaking. You wanted the woman in question to be who she pretended to be rather than who she actually was. And the grief of accepting that someone you cared about intentionally harmed you is a grief that doesn't come with closure the way other griefs do. There's no funeral for a betrayal of trust. There's no ritual for mourning the loss of someone who's still alive, but who turned out to be someone you never actually knew. You're grieving a fiction, a version of this person that existed only in the stories she told you about herself. And that kind of grief is uniquely disorienting because the person you're mourning is standing right there, still breathing, still existing, still occupying space in the world, while the version of them that you loved has died without anyone acknowledging the death. Let yourself grieve that. Don't rush past it to get to the relief. Don't skip over the heartbreak to get to the justice. The grief is part of the healing. The grief is the sound of the vine being pulled away from the tree. And yes, the tree is being freed, but the vine was wrapped so tightly that its removal leaves marks, tender spots. Places where the bark was compressed for so long that it needs time to expand back to its natural shape. Those marks are going to heal, but they need to be acknowledged first. They need to be seen and touched and honored before they can close. Now, let me talk about what's been happening to your energy since this woman's fall, because the effects are already in motion, even if you haven't fully registered them yet. You've been feeling something over the last little while that you might not have been able to name. A lightness, not constant, not dramatic, but present. Like someone opened a window in a room that's been closed for years and a thin stream of fresh air is coming through. You might have noticed it as a slight improvement in your sleep. A moment of unexpected clarity in the middle of a thought process that's been murky for months. A burst of creative energy that arrived without warning and felt almost foreign because you'd forgotten what it felt like to have ideas that weren't immediately crushed by self-doubt. A day where your body felt good, actually good, without any identifiable reason. These aren't coincidences. These are the first signs of the interference lifting. The spiritual static that's been jamming your signal is clearing. And as it clears, as the residue of what was done to you dissolves and your natural frequency reasserts itself, you're going to start experiencing your own life at full volume for the first time in years. And the difference between the muted version and the full version is going to be staggering. You're going to realize just how much was being suppressed. How much of your natural vitality, your natural magnetism, your natural capacity for joy and abundance and connection was being intercepted before it could reach you. It's like discovering you've been wearing earplugs your whole life and you thought music was supposed to sound like that. And then someone removes the earplugs and the sound is so rich and so full and so overwhelming that you almost can't process it. That's what's coming. The full sound of your own life, unfiltered, unblocked, unrestricted. Let me talk about the specific areas of your life where the unblocking is going to be most visible, because I think it's important for you to know what to look for. The first area is your confidence. And I don't mean the surface level confidence of positive affirmations and power poses. I mean the deep, structural, bone level confidence that comes from knowing who you are without anyone else's opinion distorting your self-perception. This woman's interference didn't just create external obstacles, it created internal ones. It planted doubts that felt like your own thoughts. It seeded insecurities that you adopted as personal truths. It made you question your worth, your intelligence, your attractiveness, your competence, in ways that you attributed to your own self-awareness rather than recognizing them as foreign objects embedded in your psyche by someone who benefited from your diminishment. As the interference lifts, these planted doubts are going to start feeling wrong. like thoughts that don't belong to you, like clothes that don't fit. You're going to catch yourself in the middle of a self-critical thought. And for the first time, instead of accepting it as truth, you're going to pause and think, where did that come from? That doesn't sound like me. And that pause, that moment of recognizing a thought as implanted rather than organic, is the beginning of your reclamation. One by one, the false beliefs she installed in you are going to be identified and ejected. And what's left, the clean, uncontaminated, authentic version of your self-concept, is going to shock you with its strength. The second area is your relationships. Because one of the most insidious effects of this kind of spiritual interference is the way it distorts your relational field. It makes you attract the wrong people and repel the right ones. It creates an energetic filter around you that draws in those who match the low vibration being imposed on you and pushes away those who match your natural vibration, your true vibration, the one that exists when no one is tampering with it. And you've felt this. You've wondered why the people you attract seem to follow a pattern of dysfunction. Why the connections that should work keep failing. Why the people who would be good for you seem to lose interest or drift away, while the people who drain you seem magnetically pulled towards you. That wasn't your fault. That was the filter. That was the interference, redirecting your relational traffic so that nothing nourishing could get through and everything depleting had easy access. As the interference lifts, the filter dissolves. And you're going to notice gradually at first, and then with increasing clarity, that the quality of people entering your life is changing. Different faces, different energies, different conversations, people who make you feel expanded rather than contracted, people whose presence feels like sunlight rather than shade, people who look at you and see the real you, the unblocked, full frequency, undimmed you, and are drawn to exactly that. The third area, and this is one that I think is going to bring you to your knees with relief, is your finances. Because this woman's interference hit your money hard. And you know it. You felt it in the way every financial opportunity seemed to have an invisible tax attached. In the way money came in and immediately went out as if there was a hole in the bottom of your container that you could never find to repair. In the way that no matter how hard you worked, how smart you were, how disciplined you tried to be, there was always something that kept you from building real, lasting, breathing room, providing abundance. That hole wasn't in your strategy. It wasn't in your work ethic. It wasn't in your intelligence. It was in your energy field. And it was put there deliberately by someone who could not tolerate the idea of you thriving financially because your thriving would have made her lack too visible. Your abundance would have been the mirror she couldn't face. And so she made sure, through whatever spiritual means she employed, that your container leaked, that your harvest was perpetually intercepted, that you lived in a state of just enough but never more than enough, which is one of the cruelest states a person can inhabit because it keeps you alive without ever letting you feel alive. The leak is being sealed right now. As the energy of her interference dissolves, the container of your financial life is repairing itself. And money that has been diverted, delayed, blocked, and otherwise prevented from reaching you is beginning to change course. It's finding new paths to your door, paths that she can no longer obstruct because her ability to obstruct anything in your life has been revoked. Not by you, not by any human authority. By the same self-correcting spiritual mechanism that caused her fall, the system that governs these things doesn't just punish the offender, it restores the victim. It goes back to every point of interference and reroutes the energy that was stolen or blocked, and the rerouting has already begun. Financial shifts that are going to seem to come from nowhere are actually coming from everywhere. From every blocked channel simultaneously reopening. From every intercepted opportunity finding an alternate route to your hands. And the speed of it is going to be disorienting because you've been so accustomed to lack that abundance is going to feel almost suspicious. You're going to want to look over your shoulder. You're going to wait for it to be taken away, but it's not going to be taken away because the person who was taking it has lost the ability to reach you. The circuit is broken, and it's broken permanently. I want to talk about something that I think is crucial for where you go from here. Forgiveness. And I can feel you tense up even reading that word. Because forgiveness, in the context of what was done to you, feels obscene. It feels like being asked to pardon someone who deliberately poisoned your well and then watched you thirst. And I'm not going to tell you that you need to forgive her for her sake. I'm not going to feed you that spiritual cliche about forgiveness being a gift you give yourself. What I'm going to tell you is more nuanced than that, and I think you're ready to hear it. Forgiveness, in this context, isn't about absolving her of responsibility. It isn't about pretending what she did was acceptable. It isn't about opening your heart to her again or restoring the relationship or any of the things that the word usually implies. Forgiveness, in this context, is about releasing your end of the cord. Because as long as you hold on to the anger, as justified and valid and earned as that anger is, you're maintaining an energetic connection to her. You're keeping the line open. And an open line can carry traffic in both directions. The anger, the resentment, the desire to see her suffer, all of it keeps you tethered to the very person you need to be completely free from. And complete freedom is what's being offered to you right now. Not partial freedom, where you're liberated from her interference, but still chained to her by your emotional response to it. Complete freedom. The kind where she becomes irrelevant to your energy field, where the thought of her no longer produces a charge in your body, where she shrinks from a towering figure in your spiritual landscape to a small, distant, fading shape on a horizon you're no longer facing. That's what forgiveness gets you, not moral superiority, not spiritual brownie points, irrelevance, hers. Total, complete, liberating irrelevance. And that's worth more than any revenge. But I want to be clear. That forgiveness doesn't need to happen today. It doesn't need to happen tomorrow. It's not a prerequisite for the blessings that are flowing toward you. The financial restoration is already in motion. The energetic clearing is already happening. The unblocking of your confidence, your relationships, your health, your creativity, all of it is proceeding regardless of where you are in the forgiveness process. I mention forgiveness not as a condition, but as an invitation to a level of freedom that goes beyond the lifting of the curse and into the territory of true spiritual sovereignty. The level where nothing and no one outside of you has any power over your inner state, where you've reclaimed not just your energy, but your peace. And peace, real peace, the kind that doesn't depend on circumstances, is the ultimate destination of this entire journey. There's something else I want to address that I think you've been quietly struggling with. You've been wondering if you attracted this, if something about your energy invited the attack, if there's a flaw in your spiritual makeup that made you a target. And I want to put that question to rest with absolute clarity. You did not attract this. You did not invite this. You did not manifest this through some deficit of spiritual protection or some failure of energetic hygiene. You were targeted because you were bright, not despite your light, but because of it. People who operate in the frequencies this woman operates in are not drawn to dimness. They're drawn to radiance, because radiance is what they need to steal in order to feel alive. Your light wasn't a weakness that left you vulnerable. Your light was the very thing she wanted, the very thing she couldn't generate on her own. And instead of sitting with her own darkness and doing the difficult, humbling work of finding her own source of illumination, she chose to siphon yours. That's not a reflection of your deficit. That's a reflection of hers. And understanding that distinction is essential to your recovery, because as long as you carry even a shred of belief that you were somehow complicit in your own spiritual assault, the healing can't complete. You need to know, in the deepest chamber of your being, that this was done to you, not drawn by you. And you need to release yourself from the guilt that has been sitting alongside the pain, silently compounding it, making you feel not just victimized, but somehow responsible for your own victimization. You are not responsible. You were a target, not a participant. And the light that made you a target is the same light that's now burning brighter than ever as the interference falls away. I want to tell you about what's going to happen in the coming period as your full energy comes back online, because I think you need something to look forward to, and I think the forward vision is going to be the best medicine for the backward pain. You're going to start moving fast, not in a frantic, anxious, overcompensating way, in a fluid way, in the way that water moves when a blockage is removed from a stream. Suddenly and naturally, and with a force that doesn't require effort because it's not being pushed. It's being released. Ideas that have been trapped in the back of your mind for years are going to start flowing forward. Projects that stalled inexplicably are going to find their momentum again. Conversations that needed to happen but somehow never did are going to unfold with an ease that makes you wonder why they ever felt so difficult. And the world around you is going to start responding to you differently. People are going to treat you differently, not because they've changed, but because you have. Or rather, because you've returned to who you always were before the interference altered the signal you were broadcasting. And the authentic signal, your signal, the one that carries your true frequency, is magnetic in a way that the distorted signal never could be. People are going to want to be around you. Opportunities are going to seek you out. Doors that were locked are going to swing open so easily that you'll wonder if they were ever really locked at all, or if the lock was just another illusion maintained by the energy that was working against you. Here at Mary's Angel Tarot, what I've come to understand about situations like yours is that the period after the interference lifts is actually more transformative than the period during the interference was damaging. Because the damage happened slowly. It accumulated over time, layer by layer, so gradually that you adapted to each new level of suppression without realizing how far from your baseline you drifted. But the restoration doesn't happen slowly. Once the source of the interference falls, once the energy is revoked and the cords are severed, the return to baseline can be shockingly rapid. You're not going to crawl back to your full power. You're going to snap back, like a rubber band that's been stretched to its limit and suddenly released. The force of the return is proportional to the degree of the stretch. And you were stretched far, which means you're coming back with a velocity that's going to surprise everyone, including you. I also want to speak to something that I know is going to come up as you integrate all of this. There are going to be people in your life who knew, not everyone, but some. There are people who sensed what this woman was doing, who saw the dynamic for what it was, who maybe even tried to warn you in subtle, indirect ways that you weren't in a position to hear at the time. And as the fog clears and your perception sharpens, you're going to start recognizing who those people are. You're going to remember comments that seemed strange at the time but now make perfect sense. looks that were exchanged over your head, attempts to create distance between you and this woman that you interpreted as meddling or jealousy, but were actually protection. And that recognition is going to bring up its own set of emotions. Gratitude toward the people who tried. Frustration that you couldn't hear them. Sadness at how isolated the interference made you, how it narrowed your perception until the only voice you could clearly hear was the voice of the person doing the damage. But those people, the ones who saw, the ones who tried, they're still there. They've been waiting on the other side of this for you. And reconnecting with them, letting them tell you what they saw from the outside while you were trapped on the inside is going to be one of the most healing conversations you've ever had. Because it's going to confirm everything. It's going to take the private suspicion you've been carrying and turn it into shared knowledge. And shared knowledge can't be gaslit. It can't be dismissed. It can't be made to feel like paranoia. It's witness truth. And witness truth sets you free in a way that solitary knowing never fully can. Let me talk about this woman one more time, not to dwell on her, but to close the chapter properly. She is right now in the middle of her own reckoning, and that reckoning isn't your business. I know that's hard to accept because part of you wants to watch. Part of you wants to see the consequences play out in real time. Part of you wants the satisfaction of witnessing the exact measure of suffering that she inflicted on you return to her with precision. And I understand that desire. I don't judge it. It's human. It's natural. But following it will cost you more than it gives you. Because every moment you spend watching her fall is a moment you're not spending on your rise. Every unit of attention you direct toward her consequences is a unit of attention diverted from your restoration. She has her own path now, her own karma, her own appointment with the truth she's been running from, and none of it requires your attendance. You don't need to be in the audience for her reckoning. You need to be in the front row of your own renaissance, and that's where I want your focus, not behind you where she is. In front of you, where everything you were meant to build is waiting with foundations cleared and ground prepared and not a single vine in sight. Something is happening to you right now in this very moment as you receive these words that I want you to pay attention to. There's a loosening. It might be in your chest. It might be in your throat. It might be in the space behind your eyes where tears live when they haven't been given permission to fall yet. Whatever it is, wherever it is, it's the physical sensation of a spiritual cord being cut. Not by me, not by my words, by the truth that my words are aligning with. Because truth is the sharpest blade in the spiritual world. And when truth meets a cord that was built on deception, the cord doesn't stand a chance. What was done to you in darkness is being exposed to light. And darkness cannot survive exposure. It cannot maintain its structure when someone looks directly at it and calls it by its name. And that's what's happening now. The thing that was done to you is being named, witnessed, acknowledged. And in the acknowledgement, it's losing the last of its power. The heaviness that has been living in your body is beginning to lift. Not all at once, but in that unmistakable way where you can feel the difference between 10 minutes ago and right now. Something is lighter. Something has shifted. Something that was pressing down has eased just enough for you to take a breath that reaches the bottom of your lungs for the first time in longer than you can remember. That breath is the beginning. Take another one and another. Each one goes deeper than the last. Each one reaches further into the places that have been compressed and constricted and denied air. And with each breath, more of you returns. More of your original light. More of your original power. More of the person you were before any of this happened. The person who laughed more easily, who trusted more freely, who moved through the world with an openness that wasn't naive but was brave. the bravery of someone who chooses to remain soft in a world that rewards hardness. That person is still here. She didn't destroy them. She couldn't, because the core of who you are is not something that can be reached by someone else's darkness, no matter how persistent, no matter how targeted, no matter how intimate the access the core holds. The core always holds, and yours held through everything she threw at it. Battered? Yes. Exhausted? Yes. Dimmed to a flicker that sometimes felt like it was about to go out entirely? Yes. But never extinguished. And now, with the weight lifting and the interference clearing and the cord cut and the woman fallen, that flicker is about to become a flame, and the flame is about to become a fire. And the fire is going to burn so bright and so hot and so unapologetically alive that anyone who ever doubted you, dismissed you, underestimated you, or tried to contain you is going to have to shield their eyes. You didn't deserve what happened to you, but you deserve everything that's about to happen for you. The restoration of your energy, the return of your confidence, the rebalancing of your finances, the correction of your relational field, the lifting of the fog, the breaking of the ceiling, the end, the complete, permanent, irreversible end of the era in which someone else's darkness had any say in the brightness of your life. That era is over. She fell, not because you pushed her, because the ground she was standing on was made of lies, and lies eventually collapse under the weight of the truth they're trying to suppress. And your truth, the truth of who you are and what you're capable of and what you were always meant to become, was too heavy for her lies to hold. Stand up now. Not physically, although you can if you want. Stand up spiritually. Stand up in the part of yourself that's been crouching for years, making itself small, trying to fit under the ceiling that was imposed on you. Stand up and feel the open sky above you where the ceiling used to be. Feel the air. Feel the space. Feel the terrifying, exhilarating, almost unbearable freedom of a life that no longer has a cap on it. This is your life now. Uncapped, uncursed, unblocked, unbound, and it's just getting started. All right. Thank you so much for watching Mary's Angel Tarot. Take care of your energy, and I'll see you in the next reading. Bye.